right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political, sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm here today with Kristi Leigh. She's an award-winning anchor who left the corporate-controlled mainstream media to go out on her own to the independent sphere. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. As you know, doing things independently, it just never stops. It's just constant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really is. It's like a 24/7. So yeah. And we were just talking about how it can be really kind of overwhelming, especially, kind of in the topics that we deal with. So for my audience who may not be as familiar, tell us a little bit about your backstory and why you left the corporate control media.
Basically, being a news anchor, a reporter was just a childhood dream of mine. And, I've always been curious, inquisitive at heart. And rather than, I guess, just take the advice of many advisors and saying like, oh, only a small percentage of people can actually break into the field. Maybe we should consider this or that. I just was like, you know what, I can always fall back on something else, but I want to give it a go. So with a lot of failures along the way, I was, long story short, able to rise to that position of lead anchor in my own local community on the station I grew up watching. And I'm forever grateful and so blessed that I got to experience that. It wasn't all bad, which is what I like to make clear, because obviously there's many horrific things going on in journalism right now. And that's why it's so disheartening, because I had a lot of great experiences and I'm so blessed and grateful for that opportunity. But in terms of TV news, I was in specifically TV news for 13 years. And the whole last half of that was acting as a main evening news anchor or lead anchor, most recently in California. And that was a huge, take a risk and go for it kind of a decision as well, because, I had spent my whole career, had my children and everything, went to college, all within my own community. And I just was it was like a now or never thing, moved across the country from Ohio to California and was really excited about the prospect of seeing how another community, how they do their news, what's important to them, talking about different subjects, because anyone that's in the news business realizes that if you stay in a particular area for a certain amount of time, you just end up kind of cycling the same stories every year, because obviously those are the events and the things that are important to that community. But I wanted more of a challenge. I wanted to talk about different things. Well, the joke was on me, because I got in California in March 2020, which we have now come to know as basically when COVID pandemic was set in motion. So I ended up getting in that pigeonhole of every day. It was ticker, stories about masking up, stories about COVID. And then on top of it, it was an election year. And so it was either COVID or election. Yeah. And what was really distressing about the situation was just, of course, I noticed problems along the way, and my eyes are even clearer now to the problems that had existed in media before then. But this was so bold and so crazy that it helped open my eyes to other experiences I had and seeing things in a new light. I just couldn't believe that so many of these stories were basically telling our viewers what to do and what to think, oftentimes without any sources. If there were sources given, it was what many of us have come to know and learn by now, the vague experts say or doctors say, as if there was this uniformity in approach about a virus that no one really knew, that was so new. Yet we were going to take this uniform approach that everybody was on the same page. It didn't make sense to me. And then obviously, the news was very boldly biased against the Trump administration as we were heading into an election year. And I'm an independent. I'm not Republican or Democrat. Been independent for a long time. And much of that was by virtue of that I'd been in the news business for so long. I was like, I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be impartial. And so I took that stance politically as well. I was frustrated with both sides. But it didn't take a rocket scientist or any kind of level of independence to see that it was extremely biased. And I was at a Fox affiliate under Sinclair ownership, which you would tend to think would have been more favorable to the Republicans or the Trump position, but it wasn't. Frequently in the scripts that obviously I didn't have control over, or direct control over rather, would be sentences that would say false allegations without evidence, but it wouldn't expand on that and it wouldn't give it a source. So I was constantly coming to my news director, who shared the same values of just something wasn't right. And when my news director was let go after a long career, it was within the month that I was let go. Now, at face value, it's not tied to anything that we're saying or any resistance we were putting up. Right. They were for other reasons. The rational side of me wants to say, okay, well, Sinclair laid off thousands of people across the nation due to the pandemic. And I was the newest face on that station and one of the highest paid, being a lead anchor. So makes sense I would be laid off among those. But then who knows? Who knows if it had, I don't know, because there's people that are like, oh, we know why you were laid off. It's because, you dared to maybe, or it could be less exciting. And it could just be because, I'm one of thousands, one of the higher paid and newest face, which makes sense too. So I really don't know. Either way, it was scary. But it was like a sigh of relief because I'd been struggling with this. I used to love this. This is my childhood dream. And now suddenly it's just a mess and I don't feel right about what's going on. I don't like to feel complicit in it in any way. But here I am in California with 3 kids, a single mom at the time. And I can't just be like, I'm not going to do this, drop the mic. Now, some people did, and that's great. And I support everyone that we've seen do have a drop the mic moment. That was not my path. That was not something I could do. It would have been extremely irresponsible. But I love that because, I have faith in Christ and had been sharing in prayer and devotions my struggle with this. And, what do I do? God, and then he answered it for me. He didn't make that decision. That's how I see it. He's like, well, I've got this figured out for you. This is what I'm going to do. Here you go. You don't have to make this decision anymore. So yeah. And then it was like a faith journey, obviously, from that moment forward. So I know that's a lot. Yeah. Take a step back and ask me anything else.
Sure. I would like to go back, but before I do that, I would love to hear what made you decide not to apply for another kind of corporate media job, right?
So that was like a journey as well. I think I knew immediately that was not God's plan for me, but we'll say responsible, driven by fear part of me was like, well, maybe I'm just going to leave it open, God, wherever you want me, I'm going to keep this an open door. Just show me where you want me to go. Cause I don't know what to do. And so basically I had an agent out of New York and he was continuing to look and he was warning me, well, it was kind of like a group. So I had an agent out of New York and one in Chicago. And, the one they were saying, this is a tough time because of the pandemic. So we might not be able to find placement quite as quickly. So I was filling that time with starting just a blog about basically, I called it Diary of a Laid Off Journalist because there were so many other people that were going through these major life changes because of the pandemic. And so I was just trying to share vulnerably what I was going through and kind of in real time, my reflections and all of that. So I was doing that. And then I was like, well, I'm in California. I used to be a theater minor. Maybe I should see what I can do, like acting wise. So I did a commercial out there, I was just kind of like filling my time and then also, like I said, I think I knew immediately that God was calling me to independent journalism. It was something I'd been talking about even while still employed, like, if I could just do this on my own. But, I think throughout the Bible, we see all those examples of people like that were called to do something, but there's part of them that resists. And that was me, like God telling Jonah, go to Nineveh and like share the gospel. And he was like, I think I'm going to go that way. So I think there was a little bit of that in this whole journey. But I mean, I still wrote my story out basically. And then I shared it I kind of wrote like a list of independent news operations and then just like sent my story out.
Oh, wow.
And I basically only heard right away back from OAN and then randomly from one that was kind of like, I felt silly sending it to, but my husband, on the encouragement of my husband and my mom, I also had sent amongst the basket of emails, one to InfoWars as well. And so those were the two I heard back. And from OEN, had great conversations with them. But that would have kept me in San Diego, kept me in California. Sure. And at a price point that just it would have been like less than what I had been making as even a news anchor in Fresno, which was kind of strange. So I was like, well, I can't rationalize that. And then it just was like a continued conversation with InfoWars while I was taking steps to launch something independently, whether I was contributing to them or not. So after a long time, I finally was like sent out. They had me flown out to InfoWars, and I with nothing, like I couldn't get them to tell me like why they were having me come. I was like, well, I can't just like show up on InfoWars. Like I still have my agent like seeing what might be available. If I show up there, that's decisions done. I can't look back,
Right.
Not as a traditional news anchor, that's your decision's done. You can't go back from that. So, but they hadn't really mentioned that they were going to offer any kind of like a job or anything to me either. So I had no idea what I was walking into. Had a meeting with them and, basically shared my values. They said that they, were looking to basically sponsor some more people that could get reports for them. I was very frank with Alex, I don't think that you and I think the same way. I'm just going to go on a long shot and tell you, I don't think you and I are really on the same page. I still want to do news and I still want to do it the way that I am convicted to. And I also want to bring a faith element into it because that's really been a huge part of my journey. And he's like, well, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, So anyways, he was basically like, okay, let's do this. Like, I'll sponsor you and you just contribute, to us. And he's like, want to come on the show? And I was like, well, I don't even know. He could just be saying that and then have me come on the show and be like, oh, never mind. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing written down. So it was a lot of trust that went both ways. Sure. But I was like, okay, I just gotta pull the trigger on this, and so I stepped out and I don't think did I call? I think I did call. Yeah, I did call, even though I didn't want to, my agent, but he didn't answer, thankfully. So I shot off an email just saying, like, after much consideration, I've decided to go independent. Like, thanks for everything you've done, but this my values are not aligning with the direction in which news has been headed. So essentially something like that, and left it at that. I think he did try calling me back later, but I didn't. And then I didn't hear from him again after showing up. So it all worked itself out. So basically, yeah, hopped on without even anything like exactly worked out, hopped on InfoWars to basically share my story as like a whistleblower, an insider. And then just got to work. And then, well, actually, it's oh my gosh, just looking back, it was just all so crazy because I was trying to set up independent news, be a contributor for InfoWars. But at the same time, I was planning a rush wedding with my husband, who I had been in a long distance relationship. He had been in Ohio. I was in California for the entire year of the pandemic. So then we were like rushing a wedding together. So then I went back home to Ohio, got married at the end of June. About a week later, my new husband and I hopped in a car and drove to Texas, stayed in an extended stay for 7 days. That was our limit to find some place to live. Managed to find a place the very last day. Thanks God. I mean, I know, like, it's like a theme. Like God is just like always like bring me up to the brink, like up until the point that
testing
like
you.
I know. And then suddenly boom, so it's just, I don't know. It's just so crazy thinking about all of it, but all of it happened so fast. And so here I am still trying to figure all this out. Hopefully growing and finding my voice in this now increasingly big pool of people that are jumping into this thing. But it's so much more fulfilling. I feel so much better about what I'm doing than what I was doing before. So
Yeah. I quickly want to tell you about OAN. Though, like years ago, I think like when they were first starting up, I did a show for them, and I lived in Santa Monica, so San Diego, and it was Friday at noon. The show that I did, so it was literally through rush hour, 4 hours to drive down there, and then it could be 4 plus, sometimes 6 hours on the way back. And I did it for several months until I finally was like, I can't do this. This is insane. Yeah. And of course, they don't give you the topics till the day of. So I'd literally be on the drive and have to start thinking. It's not like I can start researching, Yeah. It was crazy. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sorry I did it. It was a good experience. But it was just not sustainable.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, I respect what OAN is trying to do. Sure. And I wish, that something could have been worked out, but yeah, it wasn't going to be fiscally responsible or make sense for my kids because, I'd homeschooled my kids the entire year that I was in California because the school system is such a mess down there. And that wasn't sustainable either. I was homeschooling them by day and then anchoring the news by night. And I mean, so much.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I don't regret it. I was just talking about this the other day. I don't regret it one bit. I wish I could homeschool them more. I may homeschool them more in the future when I can get into some kind of groove. But either way, if that's the only bit of homeschooling my boys got, you see such a difference in just even taking a year of pulling them out of the system, we'll say. I had homeschooled my daughter for 5th and 6th grade. She went to school for 7th. And then I homeschooled them all 3 in California when they were at grade levels 8, 5th and 6th.
Wow.
And then now they're back in school here in Texas. Just felt like it was going to be the best thing while we all tried to find a groove. New blended family, new job, new state. I felt like they could benefit from some structure and getting to know other kids. Now that's been like a whole another crazy thing though, just with battling school over the masks and the ideology. But that gave me something to talk about, I guess. I mean, that was like instant stories. And, again, I was like kind of frustrated because I was like so excited to come from California to get into what I thought like a more freedom loving, God loving state. And then here I end up in like the most liberal part of it. And I don't even want to say liberal because liberal isn't even what it means anymore. I want to say like authoritarian. That's what I mean. Like authoritarian, hates life, like situation. That's, I feel like more descriptive of where I ended up. But like, I just feel like God was like, you're not done with what I need you to do with the fight. And this is where I need you right now. So here I am. Still fighting tyranny.
Yeah. Austin, you're in Austin, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that Austin's my old company headquarters were there. And I was
Your
like,
what?
my old company headquarters were
Oh,
in Austin.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I was and I was in Santa Monica at the time. I was like, there's no way I'm moving here because I could see even then that it was going to be worse. Like they
Yeah.
took everything that was bad there and just like transported it,
Yeah.
replicated it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was mainly by necessity so that I could be close to like obviously the Alex's studio. I have got an opportunity
Sure.
to guest host on multiple
Yeah.
times. And then it just makes easier contributing to what they're
Totally.
doing. So plus I knew that like this is pretty much, even though it like it is a terrible place as far as ideology goes,
Right, right.
for whatever reason it's become like almost the podcast capital
It
of the
has
world.
very much so.
So I
That's
figured
why
I
I
could,
considered it. But then I was like, oh no, don't do that. But yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I definitely did consider it for that reason. It's become very much the podcast mecca. Yeah. So
Yeah, which is
you,
always good if you're independent and you need to try and foster those collaborations and
yes.
things like that. Long term, my husband and I are already like trying to look outside of it in terms of like maybe getting land and that way we can still be like close but out of out of this
Right.
area. So I
Not
don't know.
in the
We'll
hub,
see.
but close enough to
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I don't know how God's going to make that happen, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I'm
he does
excited to
make it
find out
out.
as well. Your journey has been very interesting and inspiring to watch. So, yeah. So I'm curious about the homeschooling because you were homeschooled for a while yourself, right?
Yeah, my whole basis schooling was homeschooling, which is something I highly recommend. Like, if you are going to homeschool, like do it at the elementary age level, because I feel like at the elementary age level to be homeschooled and even into middle school, I didn't go to school really until high school, but it just it grounded me. I feel like I had a deep sense of who I was. And what our values as a family were, and grew in confidence that without like the need of day-to-day peer relationships at just age level. So I've always been able to talk to people of all ages because I didn't have that grounding of, I guess you could say, peer dependency, and able to critical think and able to be a self-starter, things like that. So a lot of, I think, really great qualities that come out of homeschooling as your base level of education. That being said, it does depend on how people do it. My mom took a very like free approach, we'll say, as far as I slept in. Some days we took field trips, did work at the park. I could spend as long as I needed to on math, which was always a struggle for me. So I always spend like extra time on math and then like breeze through my English and others of those studies. So when I did go to high school, it was definitely not a necessarily easy transition, because we approached school in that way, because I had to learn how to like play school. I had to learn how to get up early and know that you get the same amount of time on every subject because of that bell, which are
Right.
not necessarily good things in how the school is structured, but it is structured that way nonetheless.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I mean, I made it. I figured it out. So it wasn't like crazy. I mean, it's funny. My mom and I joke about how going to public school made me stupider because I started out based on testing levels. I was placed in all honors classes when I first entered high school, but then like as the years went on, then I was like demoted to advanced, and then like by senior year I was like at all regular grade level. But the thing is I've always been an extremely social person, and so like the culture shock of getting to see people every single day. Not that I was sheltered. I mean, I had
Right.
church, got out, but like this being like an everyday thing, I think for me and my personality, I just wanted to soak up all of the social aspects. So
Right.
it's funny, like if you look back at my yearbooks, I'm like in every club picture. Like, I just, so I think for me, like the public school, I mean, like the school wasn't really about the school. I think because I felt like I knew a lot of that stuff already. And so I was just taking the opportunity to just be like, let's be social. But I know that like homeschooling isn't something every family can do. So I don't judge anyone that can't. I'm clearly my kids are in public school right now.
Right.
But yeah, try and work it in at some point if you can. And if you can't, try and bring some of those values home. Like my husband is so awesome. God is so gracious to have picked out somebody, give me this a second chance, if you will. And he is like doing a book club with the kids over the summer. So he picked out, they're going to go home, like basically for this summer to see their biological father. But my husband is having like picked out books that he thinks will like grow them in character about actual real people, like the biography of Benjamin Franklin, things like that. And he's bribed them. I don't know if this is the good part of it, but he's like, if you read these books and you write notes on them over the summer, he's like, you'll get $50, by the end of the summer, which is big for my kids because we don't really pay them for chores or anything like
right.
So they're excited about it, and I'm excited for them.
You've incentivized them. You've taught them that, if you work hard, there may be rewards.
Yeah. So even though we're not, basically my point is, even though that we're not homeschooling them right now, he's giving them something else to do that would mirror something you would do in homeschool, like independent study, basically.
Right. That's awesome. That's super awesome. So I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about your experience in mainstream media. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the things that you found were the most shocking and disappointing in those experiences.
Well, like I said, all of a sudden having all these adjectives put into scripts was foreign to me. I mean, that is not how you are trained, if you will, or educated in journalism to approach it. It's not punditry. It's not opinion columns. So adjectives are unnecessary. You're just basically tasked. The root of journalism is you're tasked with delivering information. That means you're going to your sources and then you're telling your audience, well, this is what my sources said. I mean, that's really as simplistic as it is. Now, there's tenets of journalism that in this delivery system, you're supposed to follow tenets such as holding those in power accountable, and boy, have we seen a stray from that. Now it just seems like traditional news is public relations. I mean, they're just like essentially parroting press releases rather than really digging in and finding out what those in power are doing and what it's the ramifications of it. We're not seeing that. Instead, we see people like Taylor Lorenz, who is holding private citizens and anonymous ones at that accountable, like libs of TikTok. She spends her time doing an expose basically on this average ordinary citizen that wished to remain anonymous and was just basically taking public information, what people were publicly putting out there on TikTok and putting it to a wider audience. That's all she was guilty of. And then the same person goes on the defense and accuses people of bullying and harassing this disinformation czar. And she's somebody that was going to be put in power, was going to be like an agent of the government essentially. And Taylor Lorenz decides it's more appropriate to defend this person. It's like, where is your tenet of holding those in power accountable? I mean, this is insane. So that has been extremely shocking to see as far as a shift goes. And just like the lack of sources, you have all these supposed news anchors just saying things like, everyone should be wearing masks, and then they won't even, it's like their opinion, like because it's like, okay, who's according to who, occasionally they'll say, I was adding things like according to the CDC, because even if that was in my script, I would say according to the CDC, because at least you're attributing it to who is giving this directive, and then you can decide whether or not you want to trust them.
Right.
Fortunately, people have figured out that these directives were from federal agencies and that clearly there's a problem here. We can't trust them because the data doesn't really back up what they're saying, or they're just flat out trying to hide it, as we saw with the FDA and trying to hide that information for 75 years. So those were the biggest things. And then in reflecting back, things that I thought that were weird just became more apparent and the more my eyes were open to the whole system. I mean, a lot of my blame about the way journalism has changed is attributed to the onslaught of social media efforts. So basically, I entered the business when social media was just starting to become a thing and basically saw its evolution in terms of how it was integrated into news delivery. So much so that at every news station I worked at, there was a big screen that would tally basically people's engagement. And you could see where you ranked, not only where you ranked against your colleagues within the news organization, but also your competitors. And many journalists, one of our attributes is to be competitive. So you had to be competitive about wanting to be number one on that board. But in terms of like what that did in our substance of what we posted, at least on social media, it was really damaging. I found that when I would do an investigative piece and work maybe 2 weeks on it and release that on Facebook, it would get some good engagement, but it wouldn't get me to number one. What did get me to number one is when Sonic released their pickle slush flavor, and I would go get one and take a selfie with it and be like, I think it's great. What do you think? I mean, this is, and I was rewarded for that because it'd be like, oh, Kristi's number one again this week. But I mean, that's not something to be proud of. I mean, I'm admitting to you that like I fell into it in terms of like, well, this is what's going to help me achieve that particular goal. But it's so stupid. And like, this is the state of our society, what it's been reduced to. Not only that, but as social media was more integrated, we of course would have meetings both on the company-wide level and newsroom level about what would make the most engaging of social media posts. And ultimately what they were saying more or less was when you share a story, pick something out that is, and they wouldn't say it in these words, but I'm reducing to basically the message that we're given. Pick the most divisive part of your story out, incorporate that into how you share it, and ask a question. So basically whatever, would get people arguing in the comments, well, that's engagement. That's back and forth. Right. That's another engage. Which to advertisers, the more engagement that there is, obviously, the more they're going to want to invest. So that's why we are encouraged to really think about how we shared the headlines and ask a question and encourage people to share their opinion. So basically, this whole notion that media is contributing to the divisiveness in our society is 100% true. And it's never been more true because I've experienced personally newsrooms and company-wide meetings where they are encouraging their staff to increase engagement and do that by essentially picking the most sensational, divisive topics. And what's funny is this in real time. When you read an article, let's say just pick anyone, NPR, Reuters, whatever, and you read like how they frame the story ahead of the article, then go ahead and do what most people don't and actually read the article. A lot of times the way that they're framing the story is either completely contradictory to what is actually presented in the article, or it's just this minute little point made, but they're like, what's the most divisive point? Yeah. What's the most touchy thing? And I'm going to share this article with that point so that people will argue in the comments, increasing engagement, which increases ad dollars. And it's really, really sad.
Yeah, no, it is really, really sad. And it's antithetical to everything you would think journalism should be about. So
exactly.
What have you found going into the independent sphere? Like, what are some of the challenges? Like, what are some of the things you see that you're really pleased to see? What are some things that may have disappointed you and been surprising?
I mean, one of the things that is most frustrating about independent journalism is the fact that we work really hard, and we should be rewarded for that. We should, be able to make a sustainable living
Yeah.
in this space. The reason we can't is because of the big tech organizations, that are actively suppressing us, actively shadow banning us, and making it so difficult to grow. So that's so frustrating because it's so corrupt. If I was doing dance videos or slushy Sundays, then maybe I would be making more money right now. But it's so difficult to make a living and to grow. That's like the most frustrating experiences because like I know that I can put out good content, I can talk to fascinating people, but just the efforts to shut me down and, never know when I'm going to be kicked off a certain platform is hard. And it's frustrating that more people won't turn to the alternatives because I still have large followings on, we'll call it the mainstream social media apps, but it's like pulling teeth to get anybody to transfer, and I'm constantly saying like, please follow me here or there, and not just here. And it's like, why do so many, I don't necessarily want people to leave like spaces like Twitter and Facebook, because I think that our voices are important there. But please, like, if you're supporting the efforts of independence and free speech and free thought, then please take and make the time to support those on the alternatives. Because if at any time the main sources that we have to communicate can be taken away from us and shut down at any time, like, don't you want to have these backups in place? So that's really frustrating. The other frustrating thing is I do feel, I'm gonna be very candid here. I do feel that those on this side can sometimes fall victim to the very criticisms that we've had of the other side. What I mean by that is it is difficult to not fall into sensationalism, to again attract people that at least click on your information, so that's frustrating, but it's kind of like, it's just the name of the game, in terms of like getting people to actually look at it. So that's frustrating. And also I had a really fascinating informative interview with our friend Dr. Malone and Professor Desmet, and they talked about this whole concept of counter mass formation, where the whole idea behind mass formation is there's this fear, right? And everybody's directed toward this fear, and what they're warning against, which I think is valid, but many people probably don't want to hear, is that fear can be used on the independent side too. We're right to be afraid of like the globalists and the deep state. Like, we need to be aware of it. But I guess what my point is, like, we can't be so obsessed with it either, that we just end up blaming everything on that and not what we can do to embark change and make changes in our own small circles of influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's so profound because, a lot of people on that side talk about, how fear is their tool. It's their tool for propaganda, for manipulation, for control. And the counteraction to that is not more fear about what they're doing. It's solutions, it's hope. It's, some sort of optimism. That's actually what drives people. It's really interesting in psychology. They talk about like a learned helplessness, and and it's really actually like learned helplessness. It really is actually the learned state. It's not a default state. Human beings actually default to hope because we're survival beings. We want to survive, and hope is what propels us forward. It's what gives us that impetus to keep trying, even when things are dark, even when things are trying. It's the hope, and hope is I think a lot of people think of hope as being kind of Pollyanna. And, when you actually look at the definition of hope, it actually means that you have a sense of having control over something in your future. That's literally what hope is about. So that's really we need to empower people, not get caught up in the fear cycle.
Right. And not to allow fear or trust in who we think is going to fight back for us, to paralyze us. I mean, I think that we saw that a lot with the Q movement, trust the plan, trust the plan, trust the plan. And it's just like, and that allowed some people to just do nothing, and here we are. I to this day don't have any idea what Q is, who perpetrated it, if there's any truth to it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to get hung up on whether it's true or not. I mean, just that's been a strange phenomenon too, because things like that are so polarizing, even within our community. Like if you say you think it's a bunch of BS, then people are gonna be like, how dare you? You're not one of them. You must be a controlled opposition. You're CIA or something like that. But then if you obviously are all in on the Q stuff, then you're gonna get ridiculed and everything for that as well. I'm gonna take my honest opinion. I don't know what to think about it. What I do know is that I can't control any of that. I don't know whether to believe it or not, because I don't know whether to believe if there's any validity to any of that. Then again, it comes back to you. You need to be your own hero. You need to be doing what you can in your own community to inspire change and positive change. And it can spread from there. If we're all trying to influence our direct spheres of influence, then we don't need a hero. We don't need a Q. We don't need a John F. Kennedy Jr. You know what I mean? Like we can be our own heroes,
Exactly. Get your own life in order.
You can be a hero. This is so funny. This is how my brain works. My kids make fun of me all the time because like I correlate all sayings and all things and everything that's happening. A song will pop into my head, and my daughter was just like, Mom, you always do that. I'm like, I can't help it.
I used to do that a lot as a kid, actually. And I had tried to, when I was in high school, I was going to do a research project on it and try and figure out like the, neurological phenomenon that makes that occur. But it turned out to be too daunting a project for a high school student.
Yeah.
I ended up doing a dream analysis, which the actual thesis I proposed was also too daunting. They told me that, I needed a PhD MD to conduct the study and, kind of laugh at me. So, but yeah, I totally get it. I'd be like, any idea. And then there's a song that relates to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Connections that are made in our brains. But I mean, song and music is such a great way to have memorize things. And so I think maybe it has to do with that.
Totally.
In homeschooling, my mom would use all these tapes way back then. Tapes, remember audio tapes?
Yes, I remember those.
And that's how I like learned, multiplication. There's Schoolhouse Rock. There's where places were, and then I found it's helped me remember Bible verses as well, just coming up with a tune,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's very correlated to memory. Absolutely. It's a really powerful way to remember things. So I was going to ask you about your political views, because you said you were independent and intentionally so, because you wanted to have some aspect of neutrality as a journalist. Yeah. I'm curious where they've been, and has there been any evolution in your personal views and ideology?
Well, I think most people assume that I'm Republican and conservative because of basically where I stand on free speech, which is really sad if you think about it. And also, I think because the left has become increasingly intolerant of any view that is not lockstep in where they are at. So, well, I'm always open to talking to somebody on the left, interviewing somebody on the left. They just aren't willing. You know what I mean? Like they just aren't.
Yeah.
That it's my well, there's a couple of things at play here. It's not intentional that I don't interview more Democrats or people that are in opposition to where we're at. The intentionality comes in where I do want to be intentional about interviewing people that there's been efforts to suppress their voices, because another tenet of journalism is to be a voice for the voiceless. And right now we are in a situation where people's voices have effectively been taken away. And any opportunity that I can to, even in a small way, amplify those voices that have been systematically shut down is where I'm going to put most of my attention to achieve balance. So, I mean, anybody that would be like, oh, Kristi, you said that you just want to be neutral and have balance. And then look at you, you're only interviewing these people and these views. I would say, like, yeah, because we have a balance issue. You are already, you are already getting that one side. You're full stop. You're getting it from everywhere. You're getting it from all of mainstream news, this one point of view. So it's actually helping to achieve balance if I do put more of my focus and attention on this side that have been systematically shut down, literally censored, literally had their voices taken away. That's actually achieving the goal of balance if I focus my attention here, because I know you've already heard that side.
Right.
So why do I even need to repeat what you've already heard? So that's my rationale in terms of that. For anyone that would say that I'm not being balanced, I'd be like, no, I still can't even come close to getting the audience that is having to hear all of this. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it is really, really unbalanced. And when you're talking about like the different platforms, that's really frustrating to me too. And I just interviewed yesterday the Google whistleblower, and he's creating a new platform, which is awesome. But even he was kind of saying, like, the aggregates are coming from like a lot of the more mainstream places. And I'm like, so what do people do about that? Because a lot of really great voices have been kicked off those platforms. They can't even, get the traction over to some of the newer, alternative platforms. And I think it's a real problem. I think he believes that the aggregation is going to help solve that. And to some extent, I think so. But it's in the meantime, it's definitely really a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't know that I really answered your question. I also have a hard time marrying myself to any labels politically, because they're constantly changing. I mean, the liberal Democrat of today looks nothing like the liberal Democrat of a couple decades ago, even a decade ago. I mean, listen to the Democrats and how they talk about abortion well, I guess, man, I'm old. I said even a decade ago, and then I was like thinking like of Clinton. I'm like, wait, that is actually a couple decades. But anyways, I mean, whether it be a decade or a couple decades ago, I mean, listen to how they even talked about on the subject of abortion in what would still be considered recent years.
Well, they've definitely progressed it. I mean, now in California, it's like 28 days post-birth is, considered an abortion still. I mean, that's absolutely insane.
The mantra for them used to be safe, effective, and rare. But now they definitely don't abide by that. And they used to be, I mean, even Obama used to say he was adamantly against partial birth abortion. And now they're just all about anything. It's to the degree that it's scary to go out and talk to people on this subject, because you can say, well, I mean, I did say, I was like, is there any point at which you would say it's not okay to take the life of or potential life, pick your poison on how you want to say this, life or a potential life. And I mean, the answer I got was, it's my property. I should be able to do what I want. I mean, this is like how brazen it's gotten. And then here we are today after this. Here we are today after this horrible, tragic shooting. And these same people are acting all upset when you just defended your right to kill a baby even shortly after birth, because you're defining that baby as your property. And now you're going to act mad about this. I mean, it's also incongruent, and it's sickening. So, and I can say what I'm not. I'm obviously not a Democrat. Like, they've completely Like what even is that anymore? But at the same time, I cannot align myself with a Republican because like, what even is a Republican anymore? That's why it's like, I don't want to marry myself to a label because it's just, there's been such disappointment on both sides of the aisle.
Sure.
Even the reaction of this shooting. I haven't posted, I typically in my nature, I would be like, what to be first to post about something, right? I did when I think I was like the first to post about Texas School Board Association pulling out from the National Association of School Boards, like breaking, and you're proud when you can get those like good gets. I have yet to publicly post about this because it's so close to home. It's completely sickening. And I'm disgusted with both sides right now, because I can't even process like what just happened. With I just can't even process it. I wanted to take a moment to breathe and grieve this crazy loss of life. And here I am having to see both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, just jumping on this and completely starting making all these statements and political statements and things that we find out because we didn't wait even a moment to grieve the loss of life, things that weren't true on both sides. I'm sickened by it. So I still have yet to post publicly or even share an article because I'm still so disgusted with both sides right now.
Understandably. Yeah. And there is, and I personally think it's an intentional dehumanization. If you were just as a human being to look at the experience before even analyzing and assessing it, right? You would think, oh my goodness, these they're children, right?
I know. I mean, I feel like I can't, like I said, how can I say something when I feel like I haven't even, how can you appreciate that kind of loss of life? And you know what I mean by that? Like,
Yeah.
I can't fathom it. Like, I feel like I like genuinely like can't process that actually happened,
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
insane.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I started this, and I kind of naively thought that a lot of this battle could be won politically. And I was really like I look back on it and I feel like it was really kind of naive. I'm like, we just get the right people in office and, we're going to fix this mess. And I think locally to some degree, there's truth in that. I actually think all politics are local, and I do think we have some power. And like you said, I think that was so, apropos talking about build your communities, build your family, start with yourself and spread from there. And I think that is where humans do have the power to effectuate change. But, I think federally, I think we are kind of, I personally think intentionally deluded into thinking, that we can vote for one puppet versus the other, and somehow that's going to make
There's
this
so many
huge
wolves
difference.
in sheep's clothing, and the whole system is broke. I mean, just even the fact that we have a two-party system and we all are just kind of forced into that is really disappointing. But I mean, I've seen it happen here in Texas. You have like people vote just for people just because they have an R and just because
Yeah.
they think that nobody else could put up a fair fight or something. And it's just like, why do you complain about the way things are and then vote for the same stinking people?
Yep.
We need to take more risks, in our vote, and really go with our gut. If everyone went with their gut, we wouldn't end up with the same phony people, on both
Yeah.
sides. So it's really frustrating. And then obviously that's going down a whole another rabbit hole about the state of our elections on how safe they are. Anyways, I mean, all these things are heavy subjects, and I don't know. I mean, that's why at the end of the day, I'm so glad I have my faith because I have no faith in humans, and they're how they can be corrupted and how they can be complete phony and how they can present themselves one way and then switch under the right conditions. So at the end of the day, I mean, all I can rely on is God is the blessed controller of all things. And I'm going to try and support people that I feel like God is drawing my attention to. And then, the rest is up to up to God in the end, what he will allow to happen or not.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What do you see as the future of media, both the independent media and the mainstream media?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer
Where's your crystal
because I
ball?
never, because I never thought that we would be at this point. I mean, I guess naively. And like I said, maybe I was always looking at it with rose-colored glasses because I was so passionate about it and it
Right.
was something I loved. And now that I'm looking back, I'm like, we've always had these kinds of problems
Yeah.
in media. So it remains to be seen what the future is going to happen. I guess it's gonna we're either we're either going to go the way of they'll continue to push this online misinformation policy kind of stuff, in which case we're going to have to get way more creative with how we share information. We might have to go back to paper and pigeons and I don't know. But I think that we have the heart to combat whatever evil they have up their sleeves. I think we'll always figure out a way to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
That's my hope anyway. But it's really hard to say what direction this is going to take in terms of what we've come to know as journalism, because there's just so many variables at play in terms of what they do with digital media, which is really where it's at. I mean, we've
Yeah.
definitely transitioned to digital media. If choice is allowed to rule, then we're going to see more independence and we're going to see less of, traditional media, but that's a big if.
It unfortunately seems that way. It does seem precarious. What would you advise to people in the independent space, or what would you like to see uh, changed, more of, less of? You had said
I
about the fear, that part, but yeah, I'm wondering if there's anything else
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see more of this, like more collaboration. I think because we are kind of the underdog in this
Yeah.
mass communication arena, that we should be looking for more and more opportunities to collaborate and kind of show our force with partnerships. And I want to see more of the efforts to build a parallel system. Dan Bongino talks about this. I've grown to really, he's kind of a newer one I've been listening to, and I've grown to really
Who
like
is
his
this?
thoughts. Dan Bongino.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he talks a lot about building this parallel system, and I think that's really important with payment processors, with media. Gosh, it's like we're behind. We have so many different things. I mean, I would love to see a parallel Amazon, because I have become really reliant on Amazon just
Oh
for the
yeah.
convenience of ordering. Like something needs to happen with that. So yeah, more
I have heard
that.
people say, I actually have spoken to people who say they're building an alternative Amazon. So hopefully that will
That'd be
come.
great. That'd be great. Because I
Yeah.
would love to ditch them too.
Me too. Yeah.
I would love to get to a point where I can just be supporting only people that support freedom and liberty and values, that. And so I like seeing that there's efforts made in that direction. But yeah, I mean, like we've already said, being able to embrace doing news how it was always supposed to be done, just more
Yeah.
of just delivering information, not having to play into the sensationalism or fear. um yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really hard for people because even when they go out into the independent sphere, there's still a lot of the same control mechanisms at place, right? So, even if they're not necessarily beholden to the same mega corporations, they're still beholden to trying to build an audience, to big tech, to whatever sponsorships they may have, right? And I think that's a really difficult line for a lot of people to navigate.
Mhm.
I'm not
I
really
mean, I'm
sure.
still trying to navigate it.
Yeah.
Like I need to find, I've put a lot of effort into finding and generating content and finding my voice in this independent space, but I haven't even begun to figure out how to actually make money off of it.
Yeah, I
which
hear
is
you.
kind of,
That's
which
a
is kind
challenge.
of a little important,
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for those that have made donations, but
Mhm.
it's like, how long can that be sustainable? I'm so thankful for my sponsorship by InfoWarsStore.com. And that's another thing. When I had this discussion with them, I said that I was looking to not be controlled, and
Mm-hmm.
they've 100% been great about that. They don't give me any directives.
That's
Sometimes I'm
great.
like more directives because I'm like, wait, what do I do? No, they don't give me any directives on what to talk about, who I can talk to, or anything like that.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
true freedom. And so for anyone, because of course there's like former mainstream colleagues or haters that will be like, oh my God, she contributes to InfoWars. Like it's this like huge insult. And I'm like, this is the first time in my entire journalism career where I haven't had somebody like directly telling me what I can and can't like cover and who I can and can't talk to. So which is worse, So I think probably people would think that I would get directives or pressure, and
Yeah.
I really don't.
That's great. And then it's also, there's a challenge in that, right? Like, then you have to, when you have complete freedom, I think that's just a challenge for human beings in
Yeah,
general.
no, it is. It was very actually unsettling at first.
Yeah.
And I've talked about that too. The fact that it was so unsettling to be told I could kind of go wherever I want with this, was almost paralyzing, and I was afraid of it. And that was telling because I'm like, oh my gosh, like we can't get so comfortable just as Americans with being controlled and directed that it will be
Right.
uncomfortable when we try and get that freedom back. I mean, I think that's obviously the intention, is that they can condition us to want to be told what we can and cannot do. And, but yeah, I mean, so it was kind of a interesting allegory, if you will, when I made that self discovery as far as that goes. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great sponsorship and collaboration, and I don't agree with everything that they talk about or say, and they don't demand that I do.
Mhm. Yeah, they allow you to think critically and have an independent voice, right? I always say, like, I'm never going to agree 100% with anything anyone says because they're not in my head and I have my own thoughts. So there's no way. I mean, even the people I have like the utmost respect for, I'm still going to disagree with them on something. It's just,
Mhm.
yeah, if you're actually thinking for yourself, then that's going to happen. You have different, thought processes, you have a different set of experience, you have just a different makeup. So that's hopefully that's where, that's the purpose of the First Amendment, is to be able to have the discourse and the dialogue, because people do have differing and, sometimes dissenting opinions. And out of that is really where genuine, not, the propaganda idea of progress, but,
Right.
true
I had a really
progress.
fascinating conversation with an interview that the plan is, how this goes, Courtney. The plan is I'm going to be releasing an interview tonight. We'll see.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to release an interview I did with Dr. Richard Fleming. So
Okay.
we talked about this because
Okay.
again, you and I have talked to Malone and Peter McCullough, and have you talked to Judy Mikovits?
I haven't. I would
I
love
haven't
to.
either. I haven't
Yeah.
either. So
Okay.
even there. um, but okay. So my point being is, suddenly like I was hearing rumbles and I was getting senses of digs on both sides between some of them and like Dr. Fleming. And so I wanted to, being that I am the reporter I am, I wanted to kind of like dig into that and be like, okay, like what's going on here? And so I confronted Dr. Fleming about that, and we had a really fascinating conversation. Just about, so in his defense, he is like essentially saying, like, yeah, I don't agree with their data on this and this. And, you know, I was like, well, what do you think that does to the resistance movement? You're up
Okay.
against such a big, overwhelming, globalist World Economic Forum, and to have who we rely on as the resistance, if you
Mhm.
will, like bickering. Like, what do you think that is going to
Mhm.
do? Like, if you don't have the unity. And I thought our conversation from that point was so interesting and productive, because he was saying like, well, here's the thing. This should just be further proof that we're actually doing science as it's intended to be done. He's like, this is how you would expect science to be, where we would have debate and discourse and
Okay.
disagreements. He's like, on our side, this like resistance side, there is that clearly.
Yep.
And he's like, on the other side, there's none of that. They're all lockstep. So it's
Yeah.
like almost like a unity by default of that you are all disagreeing, that
Yeah.
you are practicing what you preach. Now, again, there's definitely still this scuffle, and I don't know what's gonna come of it. I really don't, because it just seems like it gets more dramatic the more the days go by. They're like, "What, you talked to Dr. Somebody said that you talked to Dr. Did you know that he's fighting with him?" Like, well, I would hope that, the people that I've had relationships with, Dr. Mullen, Dr. Peter McCullough, I would hope that they wouldn't fault me for talking, because I would be so hypocritical. You know
Yeah,
what I
of
mean?
course.
Like, um, I mean, I hate if Dr. Fleming has been like maybe too abrasive or not forthright. I don't know. I don't know the whole story. I can't get in all of their heads. But at the end of the day, I'm supposed to be willing to talk to anyone and anyone.
Yes.
And like this, I've talked to them. So we've heard from them. So here's Dr. Fleming, and you can decide for yourself if you think he's a jerk or not.
Yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? And if you agree or disagree, but that's up to you, the audience, the viewer. Like, if I was like, oh, well, they're mad or they're accusing him of being like a Fauci puppet, and I don't talk to him, then I'm doing what I've been railing against, censoring
Right.
someone. At least let him speak. And then if you still think he's a Fauci puppet, well, there you go. You've gotten to decide for yourself. So I don't
Exactly.
know. That's my defense. If anybody ends up mad at me for involving myself in this dispute, there's my disclaimer. So, yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think part of the reason that we have such a demise of critical thinking is because people have been spoon fed meta narratives. And so, therefore, they're literally incapable of adjudicating between facts and fiction using discernment because they haven't had to. They're just being fed one voice, and they don't have to sift through things. And I think it's a really interesting thing, especially when you talk about these doctors, because there is so much controversy and dissenting views, and even within the resistance movement, and people like to put people in boxes, people like to label things, and I think that's partly just human nature. But nobody is, no matter how brilliant, no matter how much experience and expertise they have, humans are fallible. They will never be 100% right on everything. So listen to them, hear them out. Maybe this person has a lot of really brilliant, profound, and informative insights. And there might be a few things in there that, are either wrong, possibly they can actually be wrong, or they might just be things you don't conceptually agree with. And that's okay. And then listen to somebody else who may actually say most things that you disagree with. And there's this one kernel, this one gem in there that's worth hearing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
A broken clock is right twice a day. So, right? So I think that is a huge problem. And I think it is a problem even on our side, because I think what happens, this is my personal opinion on it, is that I think people have gotten lost in this because they look at things politically. So they're trying to figure out strategy, right? And I hear this all the time especially from the Republicans, well, we have to unify like the left does, because they do. Everything's in lockstep, and there's one, even if they disagree, that's behind closed doors. And then
But we're supposed to be counter Nazis. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, I mean, just because they're acting like brown shirts, all like marching in line, I don't think we should want that on our side. That kind of goes against fundamentally what we've been preaching,
Right. And I think that's what happens. They start thinking in terms of strategy. Like, they're like, well, that's the way to combat it. And I'm like, no, the way to combat, I think, all of these things is just decentralization in general, decentralization of thought too,
Yeah. I think we could stand to be more organized, but that doesn't mean that we all need to agree,
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Organization might be helpful. There's definitely a dearth of that one. But yeah. So I'm trying to think, what were some of the other questions I was going to ask you? What do you think are some of the biggest issues plaguing our country right now? Plaguing our country and plaguing the world?
I mean, first thing that pops in my head is God, like lacking God, you know.
Yeah.
We push God out of everything, and we're always finding issues to blame things on when it really, this is pretty simplistic. It's like evil
Mhm.
versus good, you know, and
Yeah.
obviously from my faith angle, I'm going to see it through that light,
Mhm.
that people need to see the light, you know, and hopefully through these hardships and trials and exposures, people will see, um, fallen humanity and how much we need God. And, I think that that's like the silver lining in things is I think as our freedoms and our liberties and are threatened, and there's, you know, you're having to think of if you can even afford your rent because now gas is out the roof. I mean, there's this like r- reliance on, you know, faith and trust, and
Yeah.
that it can be provided for and will be provided for, and it really brings you back to faith. I mean, if I'm honest with myself, like that's when I've been closest to God, is when I'm suffering the most, which really stinks. You know, if you think about it, you know, because I was just thinking about that the other day. I've become so busy,
Yeah.
that I still spend time in the Word and prayer, but it doesn't feel quite as authentic and special, I'll say, as it did when I was really in the thick of it. Like when I was
Yeah.
doing my diary of a late off, I was just thinking about this the other day. And yeah, that's unfortunate. So I just need to work harder to have more reflection time and really bring things back to that. Because at the end of the day, all of these are distractions,
Yeah.
um, on what's really important, and, you know, bringing it back to family and yeah. So, I mean, I think the most important thing is really to do whatever we can to protect freedom and liberty and truth, because I think that that's when we can be most effective for Christ. And yeah,
Mhm.
that's my political affiliation with no labels, but in summary.
Awesome. Yeah, I think good versus evil is pretty much kind of the crux of it, right? And that's not all that complicated. You know, that's really most people can kind of grasp that, right? I hope. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you think we're gonna see another round of um well, I mean, we're starting to see the fear porn, but what do you think is gonna happen with now? We're starting to see the monkeypox and they just did the WHO pandemic treaty. What do you think is going to happen with, the media, with measures? And do you think people are going to kind of fall in lockstep again?
I think they're going to have a lot harder of a time, because I think that as this has progressed, people have really woken up
Yeah.
to, the lies and the locusts of control. And I do think that they are going to try to push these things forward, and they're
Yeah.
going to continue to try and push for this great reset. But I just think it's going to become harder and harder for them as people have woken up. That being said, when you are exposed to all of this all the time and exposed to the truth, and
Yeah.
then over and over again, you're not really seeing a lot of wins. You're really not.
Yeah.
It does get discouraging, and as we started out this phone call, it can be hard on your mental health, because it's like, okay, I've been saying this is like never been more clear. Like, how are people still so hypnotized, with these
Yeah.
other things? And how, please tell me people are not going to fall for this crud again. Um, but there's that part of me that is like, well, I've been seeing people fall for it. I've been seeing us lose things we shouldn't lose. Um, so yeah, I mean, my
Yeah.
theme, like, you have to be plugged into God and surrender it. That's been definitely a theme, just for my personal life is, fight, but also it's oxymoronic, fight, as hard as you can, but at the same time surrender, and not to man. You don't surrender to man, but you surrender to God's will in the situation. So, because that's the only way anything's going to happen, because everything is just so corrupt. Nothing's being done about the elections. Will anything happen with the Durham stuff? You know,
Yeah.
um, will the FDA, will Fauci, will any of them have to actually pay for their crimes against humanity? Like, after covering this for almost a year now and not seeing enough done, it's hard not to lose hope, right? So, I mean, I'm going to keep on fighting, but at the end of the day, it's up to God to see what happens with it all.
It's always worthy to fight for a noble cause, regardless of what the outcome is, right? Yeah. Yeah. What would you advise to people who are kind of entrenched in the mainstream media from your perspective and your experience in it? How would you advise people to maybe talk to somebody who is really hypnotized by it?
I mean, the best thing to do is just continue exposure, exposure of the counter narrative. That's it may seem like it's not doing anything, but the more and more and more that you expose, eventually someone may finally break hypnosis. I mean, I have a friend that, we've kind of basically our friendship is a little bit fizzled because she's been such a victim of all of this nonsense and the mainstream narratives, but I know that there was at least one break, and it was when she was pregnant and she was getting pressured to take the vaccine. And it was just obviously I was saying things against it, but it was actually her personal experience when the doctor was so rude to her, so arrogant and rude to her, when she was like, I think I just want to hold off for now because it's so new. He just treated her like so crappy that she was like, oh, heck no, I'm not going to do that. So it was a little bit of a crack, in her bubble, we'll say.
Okay.
And I don't know how far, if that crack is, because we really don't talk that much anymore because of the hypnosis kind of thing. I think she gets probably offended by some of the stuff that I put out there, but she thanked me for what I'm doing, and she said that she didn't do that. So there's hope, and that I don't know, and maybe it's just that one crack will start to spread. We'll see.
Yeah, ripple effect. Hopefully. I've had that experience as well with some very close friends, and it's sad. It's really sad.
I mean, the other thing I would caution is just like, be kind. Please be kind and compassionate. I struggle with this myself because I'm a passionate person. So once you get going, like I want to but what about this? And I'm constantly having to check myself. Couple examples, I went out to do this like true or false like thing that I do. I hadn't done one in a while. And so I went out and did this man on the street thing, asking people about the Roe v. Wade situation. Yeah. And the first day that I went, like I said, like the responses were so abrasive that I kind of lost my cool, and you can't get anywhere. Like I felt ashamed the next day. I was like, ugh. The Bible says, be quick to listen, slow to speak. Like, shut up, Kristi. Just shut up. You know what I mean? Like, just like if I listen compassionately, maybe I'll get somewhere. So the next day we went out and tried to do this because like the first day was total bust. Like we didn't get anyone to talk to us really. This is, by the way, this is up on my band. This one is out and up on my band page right now. News. But anyways, so I was softer and I wasn't so quick. And it's kind of funny because like I already saw some comments like, oh, Kristi isn't as good at this as like maybe Mark Days or whatever. Like she should stick to the studio. But I think that's because like the next day when I went out, I was like so committed to like having a softer approach that it didn't translate as well to the audience that wants to see conflict. But that's, I don't care. I'm sorry. Like I hope you still watch it because it was a good ending in the sense that like I actually got to get out there and have productive conversations. Right. And that's what we need more of is productive conversations. We need to stop with this like need to win the argument and just talk and listen. Yeah. And let's bring discussion back, let's bring debate back, but like respectful kindness. Another thing that's been really disappointing for me is I made a friend in Lady Maggie USA. He describes himself as a trans artist, but like he's not trans, he's just a gay man, and he likes to play with makeup and like whatever, but he's proud of being a gay man. And so he had for the past 3 years, he's been calling out the cultural dominance of this new LGBTQ movement. and he's done it so bravely. And I was like, I'm in so awe of him because he doesn't really have the support of, well, he definitely doesn't have the support of the LGBTQ. They
Sure.
hate him. They've been abusive to him, whatever, because he has rejected their narrative. But then
Wow.
at the same time, he's been extremely rejected by the conservatives because they just lump him with like the pedos or whatever. And
Right.
he's so not like that. He was raised in a Mormon family. He's like, he says he's a gay man. He says he supports your right to not support that he's a gay man. He's like, I would take a bullet for your right to say that you don't agree with my lifestyle, and even with saying all that, such nasty comments. And I'm like, I was disappointed in the couple times I interviewed him because like I got a text and he got a text and I'm like, look, I literally said in the interview, I'm a person of the faith. So, I have to tell you, I don't think that the lifestyle you're living or that you're connecting yourself with is God's best for you.
Mhm.
How does that make you feel? Like to him.
Wow.
Because I said, I said, I want to test your tolerance is what I said to him.
Mm.
And then I said that. And
Yeah.
and that's when he was basically like, I would take a bullet to defend your right to tell that to me. And he's
Wow.
like, and I was like, well, I love you. Despite,
Yeah.
I mean, despite like that, I don't think that that's God's best for life. And I'm going to stand in that truth. The Bible doesn't say that I need to like force it on you. That at the end of the day, that's a personal relationship with you and Christ. And I can pray that God convicts your heart. But it's not
You
my
have free
personal
will, right?
relationship. Yeah. Yeah, it was really disheartening to see all the negative comments both directed at me and him, because I'm like, if you're truly a Christian and you're truly studying Jesus' life, he said the greatest of these is love, and love your neighbor as yourself, and so where's the love? Like, where's the
Right.
kindness? Like, how are you going to reach someone for Christ by calling them names and telling them that they're a sinner and whatever? Like, he knows that he literally, you don't think he's ever been told he's a sinner before, and
Right.
he doesn't need you to tell him that. He knows that you're saying that's a biblical truth, but that's his relationship with Christ, and Christ will have to convict him, in that area. But you're not going to win him for Christ with that method. So that's really frustrating. So kindness and compassion in all of these conversations needs to happen more.
Yeah, I so agree. And I hope we see that. So have you had, I saw like not too long ago, you were almost arrested. So I guess my question, right? I want to ask, have you had some like moments in your career that you feel are like kind of dangerous and scary, and maybe talk about the ones that maybe were the most, and how do you handle that?
Yeah. I handle it very carefully. I like tiptoe around, I, I have to surrender at the end of the day. If I like end up in jail, God allowed it to happen,
Mhm.
and there was a purpose for it. And maybe that's the one thing that needed to happen to like wake somebody up. But yeah, it's scary, especially being a mom, because it's like, I can't
Yeah.
really afford
I
like
totally
stuff like
thought
that.
that for you. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, her kids,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it is scary. I mean, these are evil people, and I pray for protection for me and my family on a daily basis, because yeah, they are evil people and they have evil plans. And I worry about that even with the school district I'm in. Like, these people are so hateful. They hate what I'm doing and they hate that I'm exposing. And so I'm like, sometimes my mind runs away with me and like, what could they try and like do to me? Like, what if they tried to report me to, with just an accusation? Because this
Right.
is the kind of lawfare stuff that they do to people.
Yeah.
But I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. It's not going to do me any good to sit here and worry about it, right?
Right, right. Sure,
You put
sure.
in front of the other, one situation, at a time.
Yeah, no, totally. It's very brave. I just wondered, like, it's got to be what goes through your head in those kind of situations, right? Yeah. So, do you have any? I like to give people a sense of hope, because as we were talking about, this can take a toll on your mental health, and I don't want to be like the doom and gloom. I want people to be aware and to start questioning things. But I do think there is a lot to be hopeful about, and so I like to find out what you think.
I think there is lots to be hopeful for. I mean, one thing that I have noticed is more people than ever, I feel like, have been more receptive to having spiritual conversations,
Mhm.
to recognizing that this is a spiritual battle. And, I think that this has definitely shown a light on that. I feel like we had a whole different situation obviously back in 9/11, but I remember there was like kind of like a great revival after the whole 9/11 thing happened. And I'm kind of seeing that right now, that there's like almost like another great revival. So I have hope in that more people are turning to Christ, more aware of Christ, and that we're even like thinking about those things. So I think that that is definitely the silver lining, of all of this is the exposure. The Bible talks so much about bringing light to darkness. And gosh, we have seen it, haven't we? We have seen so much light shown on darkness. And so
Absolutely.
we can be so thankful for that. And God wins in the end, he really does. So uh, we will surrender to that. We are armed with the word of God and the Holy Spirit. And so we just keep on pressing forward and see what happens. But I do feel as much as I do get down and I surrender that, because like, let's face it, read Psalms and read David and him like complaining and be like, oh, how long, God, and tell you, you know what I mean? It's almost funny when you read that now, because it's like we do that too, right? Oh,
Yeah.
how long will you allow my enemies to, you know?
I always say patience is that elusive virtue I've never possessed. Yeah. Get
Yeah.
it.
But I mean, it's so we're all Davids again, like in this experience, and we're going to complain and we're going to be discouraged. But, at the end of the day, we are children of God, and we will have victory, in Christ.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being here. If you have anything else you want to leave us with, and definitely tell everybody where they can find you and all your work.
Yeah, I mean, just keep on supporting independent journalists like myself. If you don't like me, then please support somebody else. That's all I ask. Just support independent journalism, because it is tough. Anything that you can do to support and share and get on those other platforms. You can find me at freenews.news. And then Kristi Leigh TV is kind of like where you can find me on everything. Twitter, Instagram, True Social. It's all Kristi Leigh TV. I try to make it uniform. So yeah, so keep an eye out what I'm doing, share it, and support.
Awesome. Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney.